So picture this. It's August 15th, 1947. India is finally a free nation. But after the celebrations die down, you're left with this huge, incredible task. After 200 years of British rule, you have to build an economy, basically from scratch. And right at the heart of it all was this massive question. What kind of economy would give hundreds of millions of people a real shot at a better life? That's the story we're diving into today. So, how did they pull it off? Well, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start at the crossroads India was facing right at independence. From there, we'll see how they created a unique middle path for themselves and built their plans on four key pillars. Then, we'll see those plans in action with a dramatic revolution on the farms. And finally, we'll step back and really weigh the complicated legacy of this whole era. To really get inside the heads of the planners back then, you just have to read this quote from the very first five-year plan. This wasn't just bureaucratic talk, it was a promise. The goal wasn't just about GDP numbers or factory output, it was about opening up new opportunities, a chance for a richer, more varied life for every single citizen. All right, let's jump right in with that fundamental choice. India's new leaders are looking around the world and they see two big, competing ideas on how to run an economy: capitalism or socialism. I mean, just think about it for a second. After 2 centuries where the economy was designed to benefit a colonial power, where do you even begin to build an economy for your own people? This was the incredible challenge staring them right in the face. So the choice was pretty stark, right? On one side, you've got capitalism, where the market decides everything. Basically, if you can pay for something, you can have it. On the other side, you've got socialism, where the government is in the driver's seat, deciding what gets produced based on what society needs. And for India's first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, well, just leaving the fate of millions of impoverished citizens to the market, that was a non-starter. But Nehru also looked at the Soviet Union's brand of socialism, where the state owned literally everything and there was no private property, and decided that wasn't the right fit either. So if neither of those extremes was going to work, well, India would have to invent its own path, a kind of third way. And this is the path they chose, the mixed economy. The philosophy behind it is actually pretty simple. You let the private sector and the market handle the things they do well. But, and this is key, you make sure the government steps in to provide the essential stuff that a profit-driven market might ignore, like public health or major infrastructure. It was really an attempt to get the best of both worlds. And they didn't waste any time putting this idea into motion. The 1948 Industrial Policy Resolution kind of set the tone. Then, in 1950, they set up the Planning Commission, with the Prime Minister himself as its chair. And by 1951, the whole era of the five-year plans had officially kicked off. Now, these five-year plans, they weren't just some random to-do list. Nope, they were this grand vision built on four core principles, four pillars that would guide pretty much every big decision for the next 40 years. And here they are: growth, modernization, self-reliance, and equity. Now, the real challenge was that these goals often pulled in opposite directions. I mean, how do you push for super fast industrial growth, but also make sure that everyone, including the poorest, gets a fair slice of the pie? That balancing act, that's what defined this entire period. Let's start with growth. The best way to think about it is this. If a country's entire economic output, its gross domestic product, or GDP, is a cake, then growth simply means making that cake bigger. A bigger cake means there's more to go around for everyone. The other pillars were just as vital. Modernization wasn't just about new machines. It was also about social change, like creating opportunities for women in the workplace. Self-reliance was huge for a newly independent nation. It meant reducing dependence on foreign countries, especially for food. And finally, equity, making sure that that bigger cake was shared fairly so that the benefits of growth actually reached everyone. So, those are the principles. But how did they play out in the real world? To see that, we have to look at the single most important part of the Indian economy at the time: agriculture. At independence, Indian agriculture was in a terrible state. You had a land system with these middlemen called zamindars who just collected rent without improving the farms. Productivity was low, farmers were completely at the mercy of the monsoon, and the country was so short on food it actually had to import grain from the United States. So the government's solution was a two-pronged attack. First, land reforms, with the goal of getting land out of the hands of intermediaries and into the hands of the people who actually worked it, the land to the tiller idea. And second, a huge technological push centered on new high-yielding variety or HYV seeds to dramatically boost crop production. But that land reform effort, it ran into trouble pretty fast. While the goal of equity was noble, powerful landlords used their resources to challenge the laws in court, exploiting every loophole and delay tactic to hold on to their land. As a result, the reforms had very mixed success.
But that second prong, technology, led to something extraordinary: the Green Revolution. This refers to the massive jump in food grain production that came from using those new HYV seeds for wheat and rice, combined with fertilizers, pesticides, and reliable irrigation.
And the impact was, wow. It was a total game changer. The Green Revolution enabled India to finally achieve self-sufficiency in food. For a proud, newly independent nation, no longer having to depend on foreign aid for food was a monumental victory for the goal of self-reliance. All right, so after 40 years of this planned mixed economy approach, what was the verdict? Let's step back and weigh the successes and the shortcomings. One of the clearest successes was a fundamental shift in the economy itself. At independence, agriculture was everything, making up over half of India's GDP. By 1990, the service sector had overtaken it. Now, this wasn't just a change in numbers. It was a sign of true modernization, a move away from total dependence on the monsoon and towards a more diverse, modern economy. But the new strategies also created new debates. To get farmers to adopt the risky new HYV technology, the government offered subsidies for things like fertilizer. But the question became, were these subsidies a good idea in the long run? And the debate got pretty fierce. Supporters argued the subsidies were essential. How else could you convince a poor farmer to take a risk on unproven technology? But critics fired back that once the tech was proven, the subsidies should end. They argued the money often ended up benefiting wealthy farmers and the fertilizer industry, all while placing a massive burden on government finances. So, to sum it all up, in its first 40 years, India charted its own mixed economy course. It achieved a monumental success with the Green Revolution ensuring food security. However, its attempts at equity through land reform were less successful. And this whole period of growth and modernization was filled with complex debates and challenges that continue to this day.
This era undoubtedly laid the foundation for the country we see today, but it leaves us with a critical question to ponder. Was this intense focus on self-reliance, which protected Indian industries but also insulated them from global competition, the right path for India's long-term future? That's a debate that would come to a head in 1991.
Like, share, subscribe Civil Scribbles for more interesting videos.